Hello and good morning. I'm Zach Fritz of Sage Policy Group. We're going to get going here in just a moment, but first I'd like to thank you for joining us today and welcome you to Anirban Basu's presentation of the 2020 Susquehanna Workforce Network Labor Market Analysis. I have two quick housekeeping items before we get started. First, we will be doing a live Q&A session at the end of the presentation today. If you look to your GoToWebinar panel on the side of your screen, you'll see a place you can type in questions. Send me any you have and we'll answer as many as we have time for at the end of the presentation today. Second, today's event will be recorded and you will be able to access that recording on the Susquehanna Workforce Network website. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Kevin Walls. Kevin?
Thank you, Zach. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Walls, and I am the Director of Business Development for Bowhead Systems Management with operations in Belcamp, Maryland. I'm completing my second year as the President of the Workforce Board at the Susquehanna Workforce Network. I welcome you to SWIN's 37th annual meeting, and thank you for joining us. This year's version of the Workforce Board's annual meeting is significantly different than prior years. Nonetheless, we promise you about 50 minutes of interesting and extremely relevant economic and workforce information. Our format this year has afforded us the opportunity to partner with the Cecil County and Harford County Chambers of Commerce. Both chambers have been longtime critical partners of the Susquehanna Workforce Network. We thank them for their partnership and for sponsoring today's presentation. The work of the region's Workforce Board and the Susquehanna Workforce Network is a long-standing partnership with business and industry, economic development, and other governmental organizations and education entities in Cecil and Harford County. The board oversees, plans, and coordinates workforce development programs in the federally funded workforce systems in the two-county region. We seek to execute workforce strategies to increase the competitiveness of our region by advancing the workforce needs of area business and strengthening the pipeline of workers. A critical role of the Workforce Board is understanding local labor market conditions, needs and assets in our communities, and the economic climate. While the board's composition of business, government, and community leaders facilitates this knowledge, we periodically commission a labor market analysis to facilitate our planning and the development of strategic priorities. The labor is also used by our economic and workforce development partners and governmental and community organizations in their planning efforts. Today, Anirban Basu, Chairman and CEO of Sage Policy Group, will be presenting the findings of the 2020 labor market analysis. Anirban has been recognized as one of Maryland's most influential people. He has also been named one of Baltimore's region's 20 most powerful business leaders. He serves as chairman of the Maryland Economic Development Commission, teaches global strategy at Johns Hopkins University, and serves as the chief economist function for a number of organizations around the country. I'd like to thank Anirban for his work and turn things over to him for the presentation.
Thank you, Kevin. Brilliant. Good morning, all. I know it's rather early on a Tuesday morning to be pounding you with labor market data, but that's exactly what's going to happen. I want to go for about 35 minutes, and then we'll go to that live Q&A. As my colleague Zachary Fritz, who does an excellent job on these things, noted, this is being recorded. So what that means is you can review it later if you'd like. It'll be on SWIN's website. So, every several years, the Susquehanna Workforce Network puts out to bid an opportunity for a group of analysts to study the Susquehanna Workforce Investment Area. We're thankful to have been picked, selected to do this work, so we don't take it for granted, to talk about the workforce in Harford and Cecil counties. And so thank you very much for being with me this morning, and please do type in those questions in which you have interest as I go through this material. I'll try to connect the dots as best I can, but to the extent that I failed during the presentation, hopefully we'll be able to do that by the end of Q&A, because there's a lot of data I'm going to show you today covering different angles. So what's the purpose here? Well, SWIN, in partnership with the Economic Development Offices of Cecil and Harford counties, tasked us, our company, Sage Policy Group, with conducting a labor market assessment. Principal focus upon the state of the labor market, expanding employment sectors, or at least those employment sectors that are expanding, in-demand skill sets of the future, and centers of human capital development, including the local two-year colleges. Goals include supplying insights and recommendations that will support job seekers, employers, and of course, SWIN itself and its mighty board. And so that's the purpose. You know, where are we? Now, of course, the report changed because something happened in 2020 that was quite unexpected. I mean, this is unemployment rates in the Susquehanna region in Maryland over the last 18 years, for which we have complete annual data. So you can see here, the blue line is Cecil County, the red line is Harford County, the green line is Maryland. And through 2019, what were we talking about? The strongest labor market in half a century. The unemployment rate earlier this year into 2020 in Maryland was down to 3.3%. The national unemployment rate was 3.5%. You would have to go back to December of 1969 to find an unemployment rate as low as it had been pre-COVID-19. And just to give you a sense of how long ago that was, the Orioles were good back then. That just gives you some sense of how historic this expansion was. It was a historic expansion. It was the lengtest expansion in American history. We did not have a recession during the decade of the 20-teens. That was the first time in American history we did not have a recession during a decade. It's been a proud history of American economic accomplishment over the course of a couple of centuries at least. And yet that was the first decade we hadn't had a recession. So it was historic. During a recent 113-month winning streak, America added 22 million net new jobs. And so, you know, really quite remarkable. This is the ratio of unemployed people to job openings in Maryland as of December 2019. So you can see the region of most interest is Susquehanna, of course. So what am I trying to say? Coming into 2020, which by the way was supposed to be a better year economically than 2019 for a number of reasons. And we signed the first phase trade deal with China. We got ratification of U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. Some other things happened. We didn't have to worry so much about Brexit because of the victory of Boris Johnson in the United Kingdom, his resounding victory. So the politics of Brexit became less complicated. And so, you know, when was the last time you talked about Brexit? I mean, you probably talked about Boris Johnson in the pandemic, but not necessarily Brexit. But so what I'm trying to say here with that 0.59 statistic is that coming into 2020, there were 0.59 unemployed people per job opening in the Susquehanna region. Indeed, throughout Maryland, you can see the ratio here is less than 1. You know, effectively, we have more job openings than unemployed people. Now, the one exception is the Lower Shore. That's home to Worcester County and Ocean City. So Ocean City has a lot of seasonal unemployment all year round, except for basically May, June, July, August. Obviously, this year has been different for Ocean City. This year has been different for all of us. But that's where we were. And so, you know, when we came into the process of writing this report, what were we thinking about? Oh, my goodness, employers are going to have so much difficulty. And not to say that employers are still not having difficulty finding workers. But you can understand when you've got such low rates of unemployment, what the challenge would be. And often the leading complaint of employers has been, I just cannot find workers. If you spoke to anybody at a construction firm, they're likely to say, you know, I can't find carpenters. I can't find electricians. I can't find heating and air conditioning professionals. I can't find roofers, glaziers, superintendents, estimators. Trucking firms will tell you, I can't find drivers. Everyone knows I can't find drivers. They might not also know I can't find mechanics. And all the rest. Manufacturers say I can't find machinists or welders. A good welder in this country can make low 6 figures, but very strong labor market. Until when? Until COVID-19 hit with the economy. Naively, there were some economists who would have told you in late February and into early March, we might be able to get through this public health crisis without a recession, if you can believe that. But if you look at the newspapers from back then, you know, Google it, you'll see there's some economists who are still pontificating that maybe we can get through this. And the notion was we had so much momentum coming into this crisis, this pandemic. You know, we had added jobs for 113 consecutive months. We've driven unemployment to 3.5% nationally, 3.3% in Maryland. So the economy was this irresistible force, but this irresistible force had an immovable object, and that immovable object was the shutting down of the economy due to COVID-19. So here what we've done for you is we've indexed job growth, monthly job growth in America back to May of 2002. So we've had to create 2 separate axes, however, because on the right, what we've done is we've graphed for you March of 2020, April of 2020, and May of 2020. Those are those red bars. And why did we have to create a separate axis for the crisis? Because in April, the nation lost 20.7 million jobs. So if we try to graph all these monthly data on one axis, all these other lines just basically disappear. I'll give you an example. In March, which is also in red here, just the month before April, the month before the big dip, we lost more than 800,000 jobs, but it shows up as nothing. And that's what would happen to the rest of these bars if we tried to graph it on one axis. We've effectively given back the jobs that we added during the expansion. May's jobs report was a big surprise to me. Zach and I had a bet. As it turns out, Zach is a very youthful and intelligent person, and that obviously is one of the reasons I dislike him on a personal basis. But one of the bets we had was that that the nation. He said we'd add jobs in May, and I said, I don't think so. Not with initial unemployment claims being so high and so on and so forth. But sure enough, he was right. I was wrong. I still think it's a weird jobs report, by the way. And a separate report from ADP, the payroll processing company, found that we actually lost 2.8 million jobs during the same period. But set that aside, he was right, I was wrong. And one could argue that the recovery has begun and the recession is over. Though I'm skeptical a little bit of that because obviously this resurgence of cases in Florida, Texas, elsewhere has some communities very much on the run right now, trying to figure out what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to close up the economy again, keep reopening, so on and so forth. Yeah, very confusing time. But what this has done is it's changed the nature of this report, because this report now increasingly is about what? Getting people back to work, as opposed to simply trying to deal with this issue that employers have of how do we get people who are properly skilled so that I can get them into an apprenticeship program, so I can bring them on my team and provide them with on-the-job training, but they need to bring something to the table before they get here often. This gives you a sense, deeper sense of the loss. This is national non-farm employment. Farm employment is treated by a different agency, the USDA, and so not additive to these. So that's why farm employment is excluded, not for any other reason. But what I'm trying to get at here, what we're trying to get at here is the number of jobs lost between May of 2019 and May of 2020. Now remember, according to the official jobs report, we added jobs in May. That number is subject to revision, so we'll see about that. But between those 12 months, we as a nation lost 17.7 million jobs. Now, who got hurt the most? This matters. This matters for SWIN and sort of how it responds to the labor market going forward. At least that's my opinion. We could talk about this during Q&A. So who lost the most jobs? Well, leisure hospitality is mostly hotel and restaurant workers. That group lost about 6.7 million jobs between May of 2019 and May of 2020. The second category includes retail trade. That's retail trade, wholesale trade, transportation, and utilities. Well, a lot of that's retail workers. So who lost their jobs disproportionately? The people who lost their jobs disproportionately are entry-level or near entry-level workers. So if you thought that there were some significant socioeconomic disparities coming into COVID-19, despite a 50-year low in unemployment, when the unemployment rate goes from 3.5% to now 13.3% as of May, and when the workers who were most affected by this were often low-income earners to begin with, well, the disparities are that much greater. You might point out to me, however, that some of these workers may have ended up making more money during the crisis because of those relatively generous federal government subsidies for unemployment insurance benefits. And indeed, the U.S. savings rate, which was 8% in March, the household savings rate, surged to 33% in April as people got that $1,200 check, some people, and then started receiving, some people, unemployment insurance benefits of $600 per week from the federal government on top of their state benefits. So one of the issues that we may have through July, through next month, is that some employers reopening, restaurateurs, retailers, others, may have difficulty calling back their previous workforce because some of those workers may be tempted to say, you know what, I'll catch you in August. So we'll see. I mean, that's one of the debates in the economics field right now, is how many people will be tempted to stay unemployed through July so they can take full advantage of those federal government subsidies for unemployment insurance. We'll see. But the point is, not nearly as many job opportunities today as there had been pre-crisis. And for SWIN, what does that mean? All of a sudden, it's facing a population with much higher unemployment. This is U.S. unemployment rate April 2000 to April 2020. Now, every crisis is different. Every recession is different. This one was as well. So during the previous economic downturn, which you see in the middle of the slide, the Great Recession, so male unemployment is in blue, female unemployment is in green, and overall is in red. During that crisis, men were hit harder, relatively speaking. Don't get me wrong, both genders were hit hard. But men were hit, or most major genders were hit hard. But men were hit hard. Why? Because men tend to be more aligned with manufacturing and construction. And those two industries really took out on the chin. You'll remember that downturn began with residential construction, the housing bust, which pulled the rest of the economy into recession. So we lost a lot of construction jobs during that period, 2.3 million. And because that's a male-dominated industry, that would tend to push male unemployment higher than female unemployment. That's exactly what you see. This time different, because the industries that have been most affected, so-called non-essential industries, early in the crisis, were industries that emphasize physical proximity, right? Retail trade, hotels, restaurants, daycare centers, schools. So this time around was different. Women were relatively hit harder. And also, many women are on the front lines or have been on the front lines of delivering care during this COVID-19 pandemic. And an easy majority of American nurses are women. And so as they became sick, many of them, they lost their jobs, at least for a time. So you can see here the overall unemployment rate for the nation. Maybe you can't see it, but it's 13.3%. For men, the unemployment rate, around 12%, and for women above 16%. Now this is as of April, as it turns out. So in April, the unemployment rate nationally was 14.7%. So overall, 14.7%, women above 16%, men at around 14%. But as I say, every recession is different. So let's talk about longer term trends. We could easily spend all of our time talking about COVID-19, but we want this report to have legs. So let's talk about the longer term trends. At some point, this economy is going to recover, and maybe that recovery has already begun. So this is Susquehanna regional employment 2014 versus 2019. So just 5 years of data through the end of 2019. And too much data on here by half. And again, this webinar is being recorded, and we can send you the presentation. You can pour over these data at leisure. But all I'm trying to point out here is if you look at that last numeric column, percentage change in employment over those 5 years, Susquehanna workforce investment area, 8.1%. Cecil County, 9%. And if you look at some of these other jurisdictions, Chester County, Pennsylvania, Newcastle County, Delaware, Baltimore County, Maryland, you didn't see that kind of growth. And then Hartford County, 7.8%. So yes, the national economy was good, especially good at creating jobs for folks during the upturn. I mean, Amazon raised its minimum wage pre-crisis to $50 an hour. Bank of America, $20 an hour, not for charitable purposes, but because the labor market was strong, and that's what those organizations felt it took to retain and recruit workers. A minimum wage of $50 an hour, a minimum. And what I'm trying to say is the Susquehanna workforce investment area, that region was even stronger than the nation and stronger than the region. So, a great time for the Susquehanna region. If you look at, where we were according to the most recent county level data, 2018. So we took data from the two counties, Cecil and Hartford counties, and added them together to come up with the Susquehanna region. But you see this table on the right? See the table? And it says employment LQ. LQ stands for location quotient. Location quotient. Now, a location quotient of 1 means that an industry is proportionally represented in the local economy as it is in the nation. That's what that means, location quotient of 1. Right, so let's say construction makes up 7% of employment locally, Susquehanna region, and 7% nationally, the location quotient will be 1. 7 divided by 7 equals 1, you get 1, okay. Now, location quotient of 2 means that an industry is twice as represented as it is nationally. So in that case, if construction represents 7% of jobs nationally, construction represents 7%, but in the Susquehanna region, it represents 14%, then the location quotient would be 2, and so on and so on. Look at the federal government's location quotient, SWN. Look at that SWN column. Federal government's location quotient, 5.36. Why? Aberdeen Proving Ground. Now let's look at some of the other industries that are disproportionately located in the Susquehanna region: trade, transportation, and utilities. That's retail trade, but that also includes those fulfillment centers. There's distributors in both Harford and Cecil counties, including at the Principio Business Park in Cecil County. Local government, and leisure and hospitality. Leisure and hospitality, again, is mostly hotel and restaurant jobs. Not a lot of natural resources and mining. Information includes newspapers, magazines, radio stations. You can see a bit of underrepresentation in industries and professional business services and financial activities. That's your white collar worker. So those jobs would tend to be more in urban areas. That tends to be more in Philadelphia, maybe downtown Wilmington, downtown Baltimore, of course. But the thing about it is, what stands out is the federal government's location quotient. Now, this is private sector industry job growth in the Susquehanna region from 2013 versus 2018. Just 2019 full year data are not yet available, so that's why you see those 5 years. But number one sector adding jobs in the Susquehanna region: leisure and hospitality. Number one industry. 2,500 jobs. That's hotels and restaurants. What does that mean? That means a lot of people who just got jobs just lost those jobs. The second category here is retail trade, transportation, utilities, and wholesale trade as well. A lot of people who got jobs in retail, let's say in downtown Bel Air, or wherever it happens to be, they lost those jobs, at least for a time. But you can see it was a time of rapid job growth. So every industry, as it turns out, listed here was adding jobs: construction, manufacturing. We will come back to manufacturing. One of the things that Bruce has us doing is updating some reports in the past, and we're having an opportunity, having an opportunity to update a report we authored about manufacturing several years ago. Very interesting what's happening. And we think that manufacturing is a major source of potential job growth for the region going forward, because of all this reshoring that's taking place, this movement of supply chains back to America from China or other low-cost countries. So we'll have a chance to talk about that more. So let's look ahead now. So, we've covered some of the historic data, and as I say, the last 5 years or so have been a period of really breathtaking job growth in the region. Cecil County has led the way in percentage terms, at least. Principio Business Park has been a major economic driver there, obviously, but there's others. There are others. But let's talk about forward-looking information, shall we? Now, unfortunately, a lot of this forward-looking information doesn't reflect COVID-19 and its transformational impacts on the economy. Nothing we can do about that. It's just too soon to tell. You wouldn't want to start studying the long-term implications of COVID-19 now, because we're still in the midst of the crisis. Right? I mean, cases are spiking in Florida. We're still in the midst of this crisis. I mean, a lot of us, we're wearing masks, a lot of us, right? Should be. So again, some of this traces back to history, I suppose, but it tries to be forward-looking, and it does speak to the underlying nature of the economy. COVID-19 hasn't changed certain things. It hasn't changed the fact that I-95 runs through Harford and Cecil counties. Hasn't changed the fact that Aberdeen Proving Ground is in Harford County. Hasn't changed the fact that there's a Principio Business Park. That Northeast is a glorious community, as is Havre de Grace and many others in the region, places people really want to visit and live. Bel Air, so on and so forth. So, some things haven't changed. So there's some value here. So if you look at the top 10 occupations by projected annual job openings, 2016 and 2026, number one is laborers and freight, stock and materials movers. Those are your distribution center workers. But look at the educational level required. No formal educational credential required. Number two is waiters and waitresses. No formal educational credential required. But here's the issue. Okay, fine. Perhaps you can get into these segments with a high school degree, let's say. Right? That's basically the credential maybe people are looking for. Did you get through high school? But if you're dealing with a period of very high unemployment, how does an employee, a job seeker, make it known to the employer? Look, yes, I have a high school degree. These other applicants for this job have a high school degree, but this is what also I have. I have this credential. And we'll talk more about that and SWIN going forward. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes when it says no formal educational credential, that doesn't mean that you don't need some credential that proves to an employer, suggests strongly to an employer hey, this person really cares about my industry, my mission, my organizational objectives. Again, we'll talk more about this. Hairdressers, hairstylists, and cosmetologists, post-secondary non-degree award. Retail salesperson, no formal education credential. Combined food preparation and serving workers, that's your restaurant worker, no formal educational credential. That's interesting, isn't it? That a lot of the top job openings, we talk about college preparedness and a college degree and all that, but a lot of the job openings actually relate to just providing services to folks. And a lot of the skills associated with these jobs are learned on the job. An easy majority of jobs have as their number one skill a skill that's sort of on the job, not in graduate school, not in law school, or anything. So something to keep in mind as we go through this. And you can go through the rest of cooks and home health aides, so on and so forth. Now, top 10 industries. So what I showed you before was, I'm going back to the previous slide, occupations. This is now industries, okay? So number one, what makes sense? Food service and drinking places. That's your restaurants and bars. Human beings call them restaurants and bars. Economists call it food services and drinking places. Second is warehousing and storage. Well, that's your distribution center. Educational services. That could be all kinds of, obviously, schools, but it can actually encompass a number of things. I mean, sometimes daycare centers get put into that category as well, or childcare centers. Amusement, gambling, and recreational activities. Well, that relates to that fairly large tourism sector in the Susquehanna region. So, lots of industries with projected annual job growth overviews, but you might ask the question, Anirban, what salience does this have? We had COVID-19, it changed everything. We're about to see a bunch of restaurants not reopen. Yeah, you're right. And so one of the questions is going to be, how rapidly will the entrepreneurial community respond to the crisis? Because you're right, coming out of this crisis, there are going to be a lot of empty storefronts. There's going to be more vacancy at malls. There are going to be a lot of shuttered restaurants. It's going to be uncomfortable. It should be noted, and I know we have some economic development professionals here, and by the way, the economic development professionals in Hartford and Susquehanna counties, I think you would agree, have done amazing things given the trajectory of job growth, at least pre-crisis. But it's, it should be noted that the number one person who's likely to, or the person who's most likely to open up the next restaurant is the one that just had to close that previous one because of COVID-19. Right, so that entrepreneurial class, but they have to line up financing, get their business plan in order, so on and so forth, maybe rebuild their credit, all these kinds of things. And so it takes some time for full recovery, but recovery will come. And when recovery comes, there are going to be people who still want to go to restaurants, including the one that just opened up in that place where the restaurant that had previously been there closed. So, we'll see how rapidly this recovery comes. I'll have a chance to probably talk about that during Q&A, but I understand that 2020 has short-circuited some of these forecasts. That in 2020, there might not be a lot of jobs, net new jobs in retail and drinking places, at least jobs that didn't exist prior to the crisis. I get that. The growth is not going to be what it was. Now, again, more data. These are the top 10 job skill requirements across all industries as of January 2020, but that's even January 2020 is pre-COVID-19 from an American perspective. But look at this. Number one, customer service. Customer service. And a lot of these are, so-called soft skills, being able to dress for work, showing up on time, being able to communicate in a friendly, productive fashion with one's colleagues, being able to respond to emerging problems, being able to report to the right person when a certain problem emerges. Customer has a certain request. If you're a hotel clerk, for instance, which manager do you call? Do you call the manager? Do you make a call to headquarters? What do you do? So the customer service and problem solving, organizational skills, decision making, but basic skills and interpersonal skills. That's, look at the bottom here, time management, which many of us could improve on, So a lot of, at least pre-COVID-19, a lot of the getting a job was about being able to have the motivation to, master these basic skills, bring those to the table. Now, what about detailed tools and technology requirements. That's what this is. Tools. So human capital often works with technology. I'm working with this computer right now, right? Oh, and jobs often are like that, right? There is some form of human capital. There's always a form of human capital working with some form of physical capital. So, what kinds of technologies need to be mastered? Well, number one, Microsoft Office. And that is a reflection of what? That existing services sector. And that we do a lot of work on Microsoft Office. I mean, you and I had to get on this webinar, that we take it for granted that we can do that we're sufficiently skilled to do that. We have the technology to do that. But there are probably people out there who would not have the wherewithal to get on this call. They don't have a computer at home. They don't have, reliable internet or internet at all, so on and so forth. Structured query language. So now what you're seeing is, JavaScript, C++. What you're seeing here is C++. What you're seeing here is a lot of software. I mean, what's the technology we're working with? Software. One exception here, if you look down below, forklifts. So it's not as if computers are not important. So basic skills, computing, those stand out. These are certifications that are required. Susquehanna Workforce Regional Job Openings, the SWIN Regional Job Openings, top 10 advertised job certification requirements, CPR. So that gets to what? All the job openings in health services, nursing credentials and certifications, computer certifications of various types, CDL, commercial driver's license. So there is very much a role for workforce development to play here in trying to connect people to these types of opportunities. They could be job opportunities or job openings. And I think SWIN is going to have to do a lot of that, right? Help people who need help find job openings, connect with employers, help them connect with certification opportunities like these that are in demand. So they can also not just get a job, but move up the career ladder. If you look at job openings in the region as of 2019, in a category that we've studied a lot, professional, scientific, and technical services, we're doing a special breakout report for Bruce and SWIN this time on this category. You can see how many job openings coming out of last year were in computer systems design and related services. And if you think about it, if anything, the job openings in that category probably have increased, right? Because remote working and computing and communicating the way we are right now, that's grown, right? The e-commerce economy got a boost because of this crisis. How many of us have been ordering from Grubhub and DoorDash and so on and so forth? So a lot of computing, data management, so on and so forth. R&D, a lot of job openings. A lot of that relates to advertising proving ground, but a lot of R&D in our country is done by manufacturers. So while Maryland is home to a lot of institutional R&D because we're home to NIH and Aberdeen and Fort Detrick and Pax River and NSA and FDA and so on and so forth, we actually don't have a lot of R&D coming out of our private sector, believe it or not. And that's because we have a small manufacturing sector. The manufacturing sector in Cecil County is not particularly small by national standards, and it's actually quite big by Maryland standards. But statewide, we have a smallish manufacturing sector, as you know, and that's why we don't have as much private R&D. So scientific research and development services, so there's a lot, again, you can look at these data at your leisure, but lots of job openings in that one category, professional, scientific, and technical services. We're doing another breakout report on healthcare. A lot of job openings in healthcare. And my very strong sense is that ultimately this crisis will translate into more demand for healthcare workers. Now, general medical and surgical hospitals, job openings in the Susquehanna region, 2,719. It's a huge number. And healthcare obviously continues to represent a major source of career path upward mobility in the Susquehanna region. One of my feelings is that coming out of this crisis, we're going to be seeing more investment in our nation's hospitals. For decades, the game in healthcare has been to strip costs out of hospitals, right? You have outpatient surgical centers now, outpatient clinics. Take it out of the hospital's an expensive environment. So if we want to tap down on the cost curve in healthcare, you got to reduce reliance on hospitals as caregivers. But COVID-19 reminded us just how important hospitals are and how important ICU beds are and ventilators are and professionally trained staff are. So, this is a sector that probably got a boost, as well as, e-commerce because of this crisis. All right, hitting the home stretch here, and then we'll take a Q&A. Workforce dynamics and sources of human capital. So where can people go to find the skills? Well, a couple of things to note here, right? Some workforce dynamics. We're getting old. We're getting old. This is total population age 60 and over, 1970 through 2030 projected. And you can see the population over 60 just keeps ramping up as a share of overall population. We're getting old. So what that means is, in addition to job growth, the growth of the economy, a lot of job openings are going to come from the fact that people are retiring. Do you know that the average electrician in our country is almost 60 years old? 60. And so you can imagine what that means, even if construction does not grow as an industry. If you know that the average age of an electrician is nearly 60 years old, you know there's going to be lots of job openings for electricians going forward. It's almost guaranteed. It's not really reliant upon the economic cycle. It's a demographic feature. Some more things about workforce dynamics. Education. Okay. So again, too much data on here by half. I'm bombarding you, and I know it. And it's 8:30 a.m. roughly, 8:36. So this is an awful way to treat people in the morning. I understand that. But you see the first set of bars here? That's percentage of high school graduates or higher, people who have at least a high school degree, as a fraction of the population age 25 plus. So in Cecil County, it's 89%. In Harford County, it's 93%. Have a high school degree or better. Okay. And you can see that that's quite respectable. The Susquehanna region at 92%, that's quite respectable relative to, let's say, a Newcastle County, Delaware, or Wilmington City, Delaware, or Chester County, Pennsylvania. Chester County, Pennsylvania is a very affluent place, right? Home to towns like Malvern, very rich place. But it doesn't look that much different in terms of the percentage of high school graduates relative to the Susquehanna region. But look at the second panel here, percentage of bachelor's degree or higher. There you see Cecil County at 23%. It's quite low. Harford County is higher at 35%, but we've got a lot of folks in Cecil County, disproportionately, who stopped their education at high school. Well, that's important to keep in mind as we go through some of these recommendations to come. Don't get me wrong, the region has overall become much more educated over time. Again, too much data on here by half, but you see that the top segment there, the light pink color, that's the number of people in the Susquehanna region with a graduate or professional degree for 3 years, 2000, 2010 is the middle bar, and 2017. So the population of people with graduate degrees is basically doubled within 2 decades. Not quite doubled. The population of bachelor's degrees holders has gone from 31,500 roughly in 2000 to 46,000 by 2017. Meanwhile, if you look at the bottom, that's the folks, the dark red, that's the folks with less than a high school degree. That's gone from nearly 30,000 to about 20,000 over 17. The region has become more educated, but it is still the case that there are quite a few people who stopped their education at high school, which is wonderful. One of the reasons that it's wonderful to see that a lot of the people who previously might have stopped their education at high school are now attending one of the two-year colleges. This is attendance at Harford Community College and Cecil College over time. Now, I have to be careful here. These are projections to fiscal year 2029. Projections based on past trends. So 2019 is actual FY 2019, the first bar here. These are projections, but this is what's expected. The growth rate for enrollment at 2 schools is expected to be about the same over the next 10 years, with enrollment at both schools growing at an average annual rate of 2.9%. Well, that's actually quite rapid, isn't it? Because the population is not growing 2.9%, but if enrollment at these 2-year colleges is growing at 2.9%, again, the march toward a more educated workforce continues. So, enough with the data. Let's talk about recommendations. So one of the things we did a SWOT analysis. Strengths outweigh weaknesses. If you want to think about the weaknesses, one of the weaknesses I would say for the region is a lack of a 4-year higher education institution rooted in the region. There is no Towson University. I mean, Towson University may have a presence there, but its campus is in Baltimore County. It's the main campus, right? University Center was supposed to solve that, right? Have these universities come in and offer programming for Susquehanna regional residents, but University Center, as I understand, is effectively shuttered. Other things here, as I say, aligned with I-95, logistics, e-commerce, so on and so forth. Arrival of Great Wolf Lodge. We'll see how popular water parks are, after the pandemic is over, I suppose. But large number of cyber graduates from Hartford Community College, but lots of strengths, lots of strengths. Opportunities and threats. The back half of the SWOT analysis. We've seen some bulked up. We think the opportunities include bulking up apprenticeship programs and skilled trades, welders, carpenters, machinists, mechanics. Relates to a previous comment that I made. Investment in two-year colleges. Keep investing in those colleges, because that's a lifeline into the middle class. Specific focus on cyber, the skilled trades, healthcare, and enterprise management. So lots of opportunities, quite a few threats. One of the threats we could talk about is the federal debt crisis, national debt, which came into this crisis at $23.5 trillion. And what that might mean for Aberdeen Proving Ground. Is there going to be another base realignment round? As you know, Aberdeen Proving Ground won a lot of missions and jobs during the previous round of base realignment. We haven't had base realignment for quite some time. If we get another round, will Aberdeen be a winner? Will Maryland be a winner the way it was last time? And the other issues, opioid epidemic, and so on and so forth. And some of these issues obviously are threats to many regions around the country, not just the Susquehanna region. So what are our recommendations? Okay, well, these are the prior recommendations for our previous report. Develop a Susquehanna Workforce Network Customer Service Certification. Good recommendation, because you saw how many of the job openings relate to entry-level jobs. And now, when the unemployment rate was falling and low, and employers were scrambling for workers, a certification like this might actually matter less. But when you've got an unemployment rate that's gone from 3.5% nationally to 13.3% as of May, all of a sudden, for an employee to be able to distinguish themselves from other candidates, this kind of certification can be very useful. And by the way, the certification provides the kinds of skills one would hope, basic skills often, that program that would allow someone to stick on the job because they know how to speak with colleagues, dress, they understand the importance of showing up to work on time, and and so on and so forth. And also, what we said was this: develop Susquehanna regional certification programs in construction and primary healthcare. And we have recommended back then that the programs would be similar to the entry-level manufacturing training program for these other segments, construction and primary healthcare. And construction, by the way, added a lot of jobs in the last few years. And primary healthcare has a lot of job openings and added jobs in the past few years. So I think these were good recommendations. But here are new recommendations. Continue to expand credentialing opportunities, especially for those who stopped their education at high school and don't have the wherewithal to go to a two-year college and get an associate's degree, don't want to do that, can't afford to do that, because maybe they don't have daycare, so whatever it happens to be, transportation, those kinds of issues. So credentialing opportunities must be meaningful, which strongly implies that they must be forged in conjunction with businesses operating in-demand industries. They must also be straightforward to attain by people who are willing to put in the work, are dependable, and are earnestly interested in their own economic betterment. Second thing, review rapid response guidance and best practices. During the Great Recession and its immediate aftermath, so the Great Recession begins in late 2007, gets really bad in 2008. What will workforce organizations try to do? Connect unemployed people to jobs, right? Get people employed, bring that unemployment rate down. And we're going to see something like that again. So that was not the challenge coming into 2020. The challenge coming into 2020 is, look, employers have these, job openings that are unfilled. They need more, more trained people to fill those job openings. The economy is becoming more complex. That issue is still there. Don't get me wrong. Don't get Sage Policy Group wrong. That issue is still there. The career path mobility, that issue is still there. But there's also another issue now that's become more intensely important, and that's getting people into work, back to work. Target industry clusters, logistics, healthcare, retirement services, construction, manufacturing, IT, hospitality. That's what we've identified for the Susquehanna region. And more potent messaging for high school juniors and seniors. We recommend that SWIN leadership provide a formal develop a formal presentation targeted toward high school juniors and seniors, focusing on the array of career paths available to them, with the goal being for SWIN personnel or hired consultants to present this information at least once to each class. So at least once to, every graduating class. right? So you can present it to them when they're juniors or present it to them when they're seniors, but the point is everyone should be exposed to this presentation. Because one of the issues here is there's not enough exposure to the career path opportunities, right? No one talks about manufacturing, and not many people, as a potential career path. The focus in high schools is often what? College preparedness, right? Got to go to college, got to go to college. That's beginning to change. But SWIN can, reach out to young kids and say, look, there are lots of paths to success, and no one of them is better than other. What matters is that a career path aligns with your passions, your interests. Because the more passionate you are about something, the greater you're going to be at that thing, and therefore the better your economic outcomes over time. With that, thank you very much. Went a bit over. I would striven for 35 minutes. I think I went 40, but Zach, I'll take whatever questions have come in over this past 40 minutes or so.
Great, thanks Anirban. That was excellent as always. I would also be remiss if I didn't thank Sayre Niblett, who put in a lot of great work on this report. It wouldn't be possible without her. She's watching today. Thank you, Sayre.
Yes, and her name is on the cover page, by the way. So Sayre Niblett.
It is.
She did a lot of heavy lifting, no question about it.
Sure did. So you ready for some questions, Anirban?
No, but I'll take them nonetheless.
Okay, let's get going. Let us start with how many more logistics management jobs and/or square footage can the Susquehanna region support?
Oh, I think hundreds of thousands. The issue in Cecil County, especially because Harford County has tended not to focus as much on logistics in recent years. It's really been a Cecil County proposition. We have economic development people, and they can correct me if I'm wrong about that. But what do these facilities need? They need land, and they need supporting infrastructure. And so it's not just about the Principio Business Park, which still has some capacity. There's all kinds of opportunities out there. So, and remember, I-95 is there, and the e-commerce economy got a big boost from this. So e-commerce becomes more important. And if we're right, that manufacturing is coming back to America in consequential amounts, meaning that we're going to see more reshoring of supply chains back to America. We've seen that a lot since 2010, by the way. But in 2018 was a big year for reshoring, as it turns out. That's last year for which we have those data. But if I'm right, that creates even more jobs in distribution, right? Because when you manufacture, now you have to distribute. You have to distribute to the assembly plant or the plant and distribute from. So now I will say, with respect to that, Maryland has not been a leader in terms of attracting reshored jobs. We ranked 40th in the country in terms of the number of reshored jobs between 2010 and 2018, just behind number 39, Rhode Island. Rhode Island has a few more than 1 million people. It's a little bit more populous than Delaware. Delaware's still trying to get to 1 million people. We're 6 million people. So Maryland has been bypassed. So there's some changes that probably have to take place at the state level to position us to attract more of those jobs. But I think, in answer to the question, lots of potential there for logistics to play an even larger part in the Susquehanna regional economy going forward.
Okay, and this one is really just a natural follow-up. You largely addressed it there, but how will COVID-19 impact manufacturing in the region?
Right, well, COVID-19 affects manufacturing in the region in a number of different ways. But one of them, the most obvious one, is that now we have become more focused as a nation on the need to manufacture more of our generics and our name brand drugs here. So those supply chains have also been moved abroad. And you might remember that when the administration now in Washington, D.C., implemented tariffs on steel and aluminum, it did so in the name of national security. So we have to produce more steel and aluminum here because it's a matter of national security. That's why they put 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum coming from abroad, though some nations received ultimately exemptions from those tariffs. But I think a lot of policymakers in Washington, D.C. have concluded that pharmaceuticals, name brand drugs and generics, there's a national security aspect to that as well. Because I won't name the nation, well, it was India. But one of the things that India did is they manufactured a lot of generic drugs, and they stopped exporting some of those drugs during the early stages of the crisis. So you're going to see more of that supply chain of the pharmaceutical industry come back here as well. And I hope that's an opportunity for us because obviously, you've got a major biotechnology or pharmaceutical cluster in Philadelphia and in southern New Jersey and northern New Jersey. But so if the Susquehanna region can play into that life sciences, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing cluster, that'd be fantastic, because of course we have a lot of life sciences companies around Washington, D.C. as well. So it's in the middle of it all in some sense. So watch for that. And then, as I say, there's also, because of the supply chain disruptions caused by COVID-19, which, by the way, those supply chain disruptions started in China, obviously, there's even more incentive for American CEOs who have been doing business in China in terms of production to bring some of that production back home to North America.
Okay, I'm going to hit you with two infrastructure questions here, Anirban, slightly related. The first one is, will the state cancel highway building projects such as the I-95 exchange in Perryville, and what impact will that have on the Susquehanna region economy? So you can take on that one first, but the second question, just so you know, is, let me see, there was a large infrastructure plan announced last night. Not a ton of details there yet. Sent the futures market higher. Can the Susquehanna region benefit, or will those dollars go to areas with rail systems or the Howard Street Tunnel?
Well, let me say, I think you can answer both. One could answer both questions simultaneously. The Dow's implied open, as I'm talking to you right now, is 902.84, based on the announcement of $1 trillion infrastructure package. Generally speaking, with respect to infrastructure, what they do is they sprinkle the money around. Basically, it's almost like a per capita granting of monies from the federal government when we get infrastructure plans. Sometimes it is the case that we've had cycles where the money went towards subways or light rail systems, so on and so forth. But this would be a general, as I understand, an infrastructure plan, just more money into infrastructure, whether the need is bridges or roads or mass transit, wherever it happens to be. So if I'm Maryland, the state of Maryland, and I'm looking at this and thinking, okay, I may get a stimulus package before the election, I very likely will get one after the election, the presidential election. Why would I cancel projects? Now, in that case, I'm predicting a local political outcome. That's very difficult to do. Predicting the economy is hard enough. But it seems to me that if you're thinking that the federal government's about to dish out a lot of money for infrastructure, you're not canceling projects. You're thinking about what can I get shovel ready. And so that's my answer to the question. And with infrastructure, of course, comes not just job growth and construction, but follow-on private investment.
Great. Okay, so I'm gonna, kind of lump together two questions again. With, the move away from office work and the rise in the prevalence of telework, how will that affect regional population dynamics? And, how will the need for more IT be affected?
Right. So a couple of things. One is that it really hurt rural areas this time not to have broadband, right? We've talked about that digital divide for years and years and years in many rural communities. And I'm thinking about the Eastern Shore, for instance. And Cecil County is defined as being part of the Eastern Shore. But that part of the economy was really disadvantaged, right, by not having broadband. This was not just about calling up or trying to, get online and do Google searches. This was really about running businesses. And some people didn't have access to what they needed to run their businesses the way we had in the metropolitan areas. Now, a part of that question was, what happens to regional population dynamics? Well, let's talk about that. The previous decade, the decade of the 20-teens, was about American cities. Cities boomed. And one of the reasons for that is because of people like you, Zach, millennials. Zachary Fritz lives in Baltimore City, Maryland. No surprise. That's what young people do. They live in cities. That's what most common age in America this year is 28. So when you got a lot of 28-year-olds, you got a lot of people living in cities, renting apartments. But in 5 years, the most common age in America will be 33. And at that point, people have started to migrate to the next part of their life. They're thinking about getting married, having children, school districts, backyards, so on and so forth. So the next decade is about what? The suburbs. Harford County is a suburb of the Baltimore metropolitan area. Cecil County is a suburb of the Philadelphia/Wilmington metropolitan area. So guess what? COVID-19 and the desire to socially distance, right? If somebody, the need to social distance, at least in people's perception, now and maybe into the future. And with millennials coming of age, you're going to see a big push into the suburbs. And that creates more opportunities for home builders and others who are part of that construction supply chain. But you're going to see, more applications for permits in the decade ahead, single-family permits. You're therefore going to see more commercial development to support those new subdivisions or residential developments generally in the suburbs. So, and unfortunately, our city, Baltimore City, many of us are attached to Baltimore. Our business is based in downtown Baltimore. Baltimore City missed that decade of opportunity for cities. So while Austin and Nashville boomed, along with Dallas and Seattle and many other cities, Orlando, Florida, Baltimore missed it, kept losing population, all kinds of issues. But because of the issues in Baltimore City, because of the issues in Baltimore County last year set a record for homicides. Baltimore County just raised its taxes. Those are the kinds of things that might push people into a Harford County as an option. And that's exactly my expectation. So you put the demographics, the policy making together, and some of the negative outcomes taking place in the core of the Baltimore metropolitan area, I think a lot of people are looking at Harford County as their future.
Okay, as a quick follow-up to that, on a similar note, rise of telework, people examining their office leases, what effect will that have on new and/or existing construction? I know you talked about it in the residential sector, but in the commercial and office space.
Yeah, here's what I see. So I think new construction of office space, hotels, those kinds of things is going to be quite soft going forward. Because you're going to see coming out of this crisis a lot of empty office suites, and hotel occupancy is going to take quite some time to build back up because what's really been stunted by this? It's the business traveler. It's business travel that's really fallen off. There are a lot of folks right now, probably in the audience, who say, I want to go to Las Vegas right now. I want to go to Orlando. I'm tired of being here. I love Aberdeen. I love Havre de Grace. I love Elton, whatever it happens to be. But the business travel right now, business people are not sending their staff on sales trips and so on conferences, conventions, so on and so forth. It's not happening. So, for right now, it's that office market, the demand for new commercial space is going to be stunted. But there will be a lot of demand for existing structures to be modified, to be modernized. And one of the things that's going to happen in a lot of these existing structures, including Class B buildings, and there are a lot of them in, say, a downtown Bel Air, for instance, or a downtown Elton, older buildings. They are associated with lower rents often than, always, than Class A and Class A plus buildings, those newer buildings. But if they can modernize their HVAC systems, because you can transmit the virus through air conditioning systems or air handling systems generally. So Class B is back in the game because a lot of businesses are looking to save on rent now. Before, you want to be in this glitzy office building. Why? Because you're trying to recruit talent. And how can I recruit the best college graduates or the best graduates of graduate programs, and I bring them to a Class B space, and they say, oh, I'd rather go work for that person. They're in Class A space. They must be more successful. So to try to provide people with an indication of our success as an organization, people poured into Class A and Class A plus space, paying higher rent in the process. But it was all, among other things, a recruitment tool. But it also probably fed into the CEO's ego as well. Now it's about, hey, I don't need to do that. There are lots of people looking for work. I can sign my next lease in the Class B building, but I want to see a new HVAC system, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. I want to see bathrooms with partitions that go all the way to the ground. I want to see no hand blowers in the bathrooms, because those hand blowers, when you dry your hands, they can spread virus. I want to see old paper towel dispensers. Those are the kinds of things we're talking about. But you're going to see Class B come back into the ball game, and that's going to be one of the changes in commercial real estate going forward.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe 2 or 3. So try to get through them quickly if possible.
Yep.
Let me try to pick the best ones we have here. Maryland's Laos data, that's local area unemployment statistics, shows that our labor force is shrank. You've touched on this during the presentation. How do we get those people off the sidelines?
This is a great question, and I touched upon it a little bit, but I didn't touch upon it enough. So one of the things that really has not garnered much attention, people have paid attention to the job loss and the initial weekly unemployment claims. 43 million, more than 43 million Americans filing for unemployment insurance during this crisis, so on and so forth. The fact that more than 20 million people are still on unemployment insurance across the country. But But one of the things upon which people have not focused is the dwindling of the labor force participation rate. So the labor force participation rate in Maryland recently hit a low that it has not seen since 1976. So labor force participation was close to 69% coming into the crisis in Maryland. It's dropped many percentage points. And one of the questions is, how many of these people, because remember, to be part of the labor force, you have to be either working or looking for work. So what this is saying is a lot of people not only lost their jobs, they are not looking for work. Now, part of that might be due to the unemployment insurance structure. So this could be merely temporary. But I really believe if the Great Recession is any indication, that a lot of these people will drop out of the labor force permanently. Some of these folks might have been close to retirement, for instance, say, that's enough, I've done it, I'm going to start collecting Social Security now. You know, all kinds of stories out there. But it's a real problem out here. And so one of the challenges for SWIN, and I don't know if it's a challenge any organization could actually handle, of whatever size, is if the labor force participation rate does not bounce back, and you've got a lot of disengaged people living in Cecil and Harford counties who before had been working, but now said, I give up, I'm frustrated. It's not worth it. Can you reach into that population? That's a tough one. But I think the only way is to say, look, we're offering this program, you know, and advertise it widely to credential yourselves and get yourself a very good job in a service field. Come to SWIN for that. But yeah, that's a very big problem, and I'm very worried that we'll have lost years of progress in terms of getting people back into the labor force after the Great Recession.
Okay, this one is specific, but I'll let you give it a go. How should Susquehanna Workforce Network develop its customer service credential?
Across many segments. So one of the issues here is that some of the retail stakeholders, as I understand it, have wanted it to be focused on retail trade, but customer service cuts across industries. It's customer services in healthcare, isn't it? I mean, studies have been done on malpractice lawsuits, and it's been shown that in the case of let's say there's a questionable medical procedure or error, it's been shown that if people who visited the medical center, let's say a hospital, something went wrong, but if they were treated well, if they were greeted kindly, if they were greeted with favorable customer service, in other words, they tend not to sue. That's what people want. They want service at retail, hotels, barbershops, service. It's customer service everywhere, right? Sage Policy Group, right? We're economists, but customer service matters. And so, yeah, so that credential should be across industries. I think it should be a certification that one could achieve in about 3 months, maybe 6 months. I mean, Bruce and others would know better about that. But you're trying to impart information about what are the key skills employers are looking for? How important is it to show up to work? Because the number one reason an American loses their job under normal circumstances is they didn't show up to work. Number one reason to be fired, didn't show up to work. Tardiness is another factor, right? So how do you speak to colleagues? How do you dress for success at the workplace, right? What is a proper way to address a customer complaint, right? It's not to yell back at the customer, probably, right? So that might be maybe that is the right thing to do in some sense, the justifiable thing to do, right? But not the right thing to do from a business sense. So anyway, that's what it should be about. Customer service, very basic, easy to obtain across industries, because customer service cuts across industries.
Great. So this will be our last question, and let me apologize in advance to all the people who asked questions we won't have time to get to. There were a ton of great questions. So thank you all who submitted.
Now, I understood, Zach, that we're supposed to go till 9:15.
Okay, I was leaving time for Bruce.
Oh, yeah, Bruce. I forgot about Bruce. Okay, fine. Go ahead. One last question.
Yeah, well, if you're quick, we can maybe squeeze in another.
Okay, go ahead. I'll try to be quick.
Does a vaccine return things to normal, or will there be long-term impacts?
I think vaccine returns things to normal very, very quickly. Very quickly. And we have examples of this. I mean, probably not a lot of people remember polio and how it devastated children in the early 1950s. But when Jonas Salk came up with that vaccine in 1955, and I believe he was 40 years old when he did it. I think he did it as a 40-year-old without a computer. But when Jonas Salk did that, hero, and there should be a national holiday for Jonas Salk, if you look at the life of people after that happened, things went back to normal very, very quickly, right? When we were growing up, what show did we watch to learn about the 1950s? Happy Days, right? I mean, so things, and obviously Laverne and Shirley, but things went back to normal pretty quickly. So yeah, I think once you get a vaccine, people return to what they do, right? They hug, and they go to baseball games and football games, and they high five, and they go to conferences and conventions, and yeah, they return to their office space and so on and so forth, because who wants to work remotely the rest of their lives? Well, some people, but not a lot of us, right? We love that office interplay, and that socialization, that office work or wherever we're working. It doesn't have to be an office, a manufacturing plant, wherever it is, a distribution center, that gives us that socialization. So in any case, things return to normal very quickly. One more question, Zach, then we'll still leave time for Bruce.
Okay. Are the community college enrollment projections from pre-COVID still valid, or will those need to be updated considering the impact on the broader economy?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, they probably need to be updated somewhat, but I think they're still relatively accurate. Because, if Pfizer, I mean, getting back to the previous question, Pfizer is talking about a vaccine by the fall, Moderna is talking about a vaccine by the end of the year. So the cure comes from whom? Moderna, Pfizer, Merck, Novartis, Regeneron, Gilead Sciences, somebody, Bayer AG, Johnson & Johnson, somebody in the life sciences community is going to come up with this. That's my prediction. And a lot of healthcare experts have said we're not going to get a vaccine until the end of next year, end of 2021, because all this. They're moving as quickly as they can, and they're not going to be forced to jump through a bunch of hoops. If it shows clinical efficacy, and by the way, the Gilead Sciences drug remdesivir already has been shown to have some clinical efficacy, especially if you're not on hydroxychloroquine at the same time. So, so we're learning more about this, and I think we'll return normal reasonably quickly. At some point in 2021, you and I are going to be in an Orioles game, if not sooner. And so anyway, so I think there's some interruption in that community college projection, but I think they're still by and large valid.
Is it possible that we see a spike in the short term? I've graduated from college, but if a student doesn't want to go to school to attend virtual classes, they're not paying $40,000 to go out of state, they might take a semester or two at a local community college. Is it possible we see a spike?
Yeah, that's right. So it might be an interruption, right? So I delayed by a year. So the campus isn't open yet, or I don't feel safe on campus, or whatever happens to be. My parents are saying you have to socially distance, you're not allowed to go, and so on and so forth. You have to take a bus to get there. I don't want you on the bus. So whatever it is, yeah, I mean, like I say, there's some disruption here. But if you think about the underlying demographics, if you talk about the fundamentals of this economy, if you talk about all the people who graduate from high schools in the Susquehanna region who don't go on to a four-year college, all of that provides sustenance and support for the two-year colleges. And I think businesses recognize, the business community recognizes how important two-year colleges have become and are. And you're going to see more partnerships with business as well, which adds to the programming volume at these two-year colleges, or at least will. So the two-year colleges are going to be a big winner coming out of this.
Great. Okay, well, thanks for taking all those questions, Anirban. Thanks for everyone who asked questions. Bruce, if you want to hop on to give us some closing remarks, that would be great. Bruce England from Susquehanna Workforce Network, everybody.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Anirban, for your always informing and entertaining presentation. Thank you to the 170 or so attendees for your participation and your questions this morning. Looking forward to answering more questions as time goes on. As Anirban mentioned, in addition to the labor market analysis, Sage Policy Group is providing 4 industry reports which focus on critical industries in our region. These include professional, scientific, and technical industry, healthcare, distribution, logistics, and manufacturing. The first 2 of those reports are complete. The other 2 reports will be done soon. The full labor market analysis, along with these 4 additional reports, can be accessed on SWIN's website at www.swnetwork.org. We just launched a new website last night, so when you go to our website, if you like what you see, I'd be interested in your input. There still are some kinks that we need to work out. But also for your convenience, I'll have the emails of those folks that register today, and we will email links to all the attendees. Over the coming weeks and months, the labor market analysis and these 4 reports will be used by the Workforce Board and others for planning and programming purposes to develop priorities and initiatives. I hope many of you will join us in these discussions that will help advance workforce development efforts in our region, provide businesses with workers they need, and assist residents with career opportunities. The Susquehanna Workforce Network's business service operations continues to assist the business community with attracting, retaining, and developing their workforce, and have been reaching out the past couple of months to assist businesses with new needs. The Susquehanna Workforce Center staff have adjusted to pandemic times and are helping residents with their career and employment goals and with connecting the recently unemployed with opportunities. SWIN's youth and young adult programs are refocusing on the emerging workforce to assist them with entry-level opportunities that offer career potential. We appreciate the many economic and workforce development organizations that partner with us to advance these initiatives, and we thank you. I would like to again acknowledge and thank Debbie Brown of the Cecil County Chamber and Angela Rose of the Harford County Chamber for being our presentation sponsors today. This helped us expose this information to more participants and these valuable reports. Thank you, Chambers. And finally, I would like to thank the Workforce Board members and their respective businesses and organizations who volunteer their time to lead initiatives addressing important matters in our community. I would also like to recognize the staff of the Susquehanna Workforce Network who work with so many of you to help our business community grow and our residents realize opportunities. On behalf of the Workforce Board, we value the time you spent with us today, and we will look forward to continuing to work with you. This ends our presentation this morning. We're looking forward to working with you face-to-face sometime in the near future. Thank you for joining us.